Hello everyone, you're watching The Girls here on SSP TV, and today we are talking about a subject that we really don't talk too much about, and we need to be more open and honest about that, and that is domestic violence.
That's right, Jeannine, and in the world of domestic violence, for some reason, the winter months are the worst months for people to reach out if they are being abused. So today we're going to give you some inside information on if you are being abused, how to know if you're being abused, what to do, where to go, and we're also going to speak with a father of someone who was murdered by their spouse.
Yes.
So it's going to be a very interesting and very informational show, heart-wrenching show as well. So if you know anyone that you think should see this show, give them a call now and tell them to watch it. And you can watch it again on all your devices. Download your SSP TV app. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get started with the show.
Don't hit me. That's the pin that we're talking about today. It's domestic violence is the topic of The Girls here on SSP TV. We're taping in our Laurel Mall location, and we're very pleased to have Tammy Rodgers with us. She is the volunteer education coordinator with the Domestic Violence Service Center. And Tammy, it's nice to have you on our program. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm glad that we're able to come out and talk about what it is that we need to be aware of.
So are we, because we know so many people in our own lives who maybe are unaware of the fact that they have domestic violence going on. So what we're going to try and do today is have you tell people, what is domestic violence? I mean, it encompasses such a broad area, but for anybody that might not know, what is domestic violence?
Well, the definition of domestic violence is that it's abuse in a close and personal relationship. It's between husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, same-sex couples. It's also between parents and their adult children. Abuse or battering is a means of exercising power and control over somebody else, and that's what domestic violence is all about. It's about wanting to have that power and control over another person.
Okay, and so what forms of control do they use?
They can use a lot of different areas. It could be anywhere from the physical, which we're most familiar with, you know, the punching, the kicking, the hitting, the slapping. But then it can go to the verbal abuse, which are the insults, the name calling, the put downs, you're fat, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're a rotten mother. It also can go to the emotional abuse, whereas the mind games, sleep deprivation, and tactics similar to those used against prisoners of war. There's also the sexual abuse, such as marital rape. There's also the financial abuse. There's also isolation from family and friends. And there's also the threats to harm. I'll kill myself if you ever leave me.
Well, there are a list of things that you should really be aware of, and we wanted to actually take some time to read through these. So if you know of somebody who actually can answer yes to any of these questions, or if you yourself are going through this, we urge you to contact the Domestic Violence Service Center. So does your partner, 1, isolate yourself from people you care about or from friends you had before you dated him? 2, frequently embarrass you or make fun of you in front of other people? 3, use intimidation to make you do what he wants? 4, make you feel there is no way out of your relationship? 5, make you perform sexual acts that you don't enjoy? 6, threaten you with force, words, or weapons? 7, use alcohol or drugs as an excuse for saying hurtful things or abusing you? 8, getting very angry frequently and you don't understand why? 9, not believe he has hurt you or blame you for what he's done? And 10, physically force you to do what you do not want to do. If you can answer yes to any of those questions, the number on the screen are the numbers that you can call for help. we did talk about that we sometimes, you know, we talked about this briefly before we started the show, that sometimes it's like that only happens in the movies. That this is never going to happen to me. You know, this isn't going to be my life. You're in that denial where you might be sitting at home thinking, like, I'm that person, that it's never going to happen to me. And we're going to be talking with a gentleman who has lost his daughter to domestic violence later in the program, and to shed some light on that. But do you see that more frequently, that these incidents happen because of that, pretty much the denial of?
Oh, absolutely. People don't want to think that it's going on in their household. They say, oh, it's not that bad. Other people have it worse. But in actuality, a domestic violence incident happens every 9 seconds in the United States. Between 4 and 6 million women are beaten each year, and over 4,000 of them are murdered. In 2016, we had 102 deaths due to domestic violence in the state of Pennsylvania. Luzerne County alone, it ranks number 5 from the year of 2004 to now, as far as the highest number of homicides to domestic violence.
Well, when Jeannine was reading that list, she used the word he a lot. Can it be a she who's abusing someone as well?
Oh, absolutely. We provide services to men as well as women. The thing of it is that men kind of have a stigma that they don't want to come out and admit that it's going on to them, because of the fact that they think, well, you know, the guys are going to think that they're not a man, or that they're being a wuss. So what's important is that more men, you know, if you are a victim of domestic violence, it can also be a male as well.
Now, does this build up to the hitting and the actual act of murder? Does it always start where it's just verbal first, or can you be in that relationship where it is only verbal and it doesn't get any further? How does domestic violence usually, you know, what's the pattern, I guess I should say?
Well, it could reach any pattern. In actuality, a lot of times the abuser, when they first meet the abuser, he's very charming and he makes the woman feel wonderful. And I'm using he because the majority of victims are female. It's estimated that between 95 to 98% of all victims of domestic violence are female.
So that's the profile.
So, but those statistics change. But later on, there starts that whole control issue that at first what he liked was what you were wearing. Now, you know, what are you wearing that for? You know, that makes you look awful, you know, or he'll use other terms, but, you know, and controlling where you're going, who you're talking to, why do you have to do that? And by that time, she has gotten into the situation that, well, I'm just making a lot out of it, or I'm just making, you know, it's no big deal, you know, until it ends up that he's going to hit her.
Well, if a woman does call you, first of all, which ages do you help?
Well, we can help any age.
Okay.
Okay. We actually serve, it's usually for adult victims of domestic violence. It's usually 18 and older, but we do have calls from teenagers who might be in a situation. But the usual age for victims of domestic violence is anywhere from 18 to 24.
So if you have a child who calls you and says, I think my dad is abusing my mother, can you help? Yeah.
We can try to help. We would use our resources to be able to, you know, find out what's going on.
Okay, so after someone makes a call to you, what's the next step?
We're going to assess the situation, what's going on. Are they safe at that point in time? We will say, you know, do you need us to call somebody? You know, and a lot of times it's not usually that the situation is going on right at that point in time, but it's happened maybe a couple hours before. And so, okay, what do you need? Do you need us to call the police? Do you need us to call the ambulance? You know, and if not, then what is it that we can help you with? And usually they'll say, well, you know, I've been a victim of domestic violence. This is what's going on. They, and then they decide as to what they want to do. And we provide options. We're all about options and empowerment counseling, because you know, the folks that we deal with, they've been, you know, in the gutter, basically.
They can't really think for themselves at that point because
Yeah,
I guess they're...
they have never been allowed to make any choices for themselves.
It must be overwhelming, and it seems like the answer everyone could know from the outside, but if you're on the inside, it might seem overwhelming, and it might seem that you're used to that pattern, so if you get out of that pattern, you're uncomfortable with it because change is hard.
Well, absolutely, and a lot of times people will stay because they don't want to have to deal with finding a place to live. What are they going to do with the kids? What are they going to do as far as a job is concerned? Because maybe they don't have an education and maybe they don't have any employment skills. And how are they going to get back and forth to work, especially if they, you know, live in a rural area? We provide services down in Carbon County. They don't have taxis or buses down there. They've got one taxi and one Uber for the whole entire county.
Okay, so they call you and then you can recommend, but what if they need to get out of the situation that they're in? Do you have someone meet them? Do they have to get to you? How do you get them out of that into a safe place?
It all depends on what the situation is. Maybe they can't leave right at that point in time because maybe the abuser is around there, or maybe he's going to be coming back home, and they decide when it is that they want to leave. Okay, but if they want to leave that at that point in time, we can kind of collaborate with police departments, taxi services. Maybe we can find a bus, or maybe if they can, maybe if they're at the hospital, we can have, we have medical advocates that will go and pick the clients up and do transportation. So.
We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we have Terry Renninger with us. He is the father of the late Rebecca, and that was his daughter. She was a victim of domestic violence, and we're also going to talk about these laws. Is it because of the laws that people are forced to stay in abusive relationships?
Stay with us, we'll be right back.
And welcome back. If you're just tuning in, you're watching The Girls on SSP TV, and we are talking about domestic violence today. Our guest, Tammy Rodgers, is the Volunteer Education Coordinator with Domestic Violence Service Center. And we are pleased now to have Terry Renninger with us. He is the father of one of a domestic violence victim, which happened to be his daughter, Rebecca. So thank you again for being on the program with us today.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Quite welcome.
Terry, what role do you now play in reaching out to, with education-wise, for other victims to try and help them now that you've gone through this yourself?
Well, let me start out by saying, if I didn't do what I'm doing, speaking out because I believe in God and evil, and if I didn't speak out, then evil would win the brutal murder of my daughter. So that's why I go out and speak wherever I can, to talk about the danger signs and women who are going through abuse. They're probably brainwashed. They think they can't get out of the abusive relationship. And to call, make that phone call, that's very important.
Why don't you take us back to what happened to your daughter, if you wouldn't mind telling and sharing that with us, and give us some insight as to an actual case of what happened.
Okay, my daughter started dating her future husband in high school, Crestwood Senior High School. And when we saw some abusive signs, but she was always saying nothing was wrong.
Like what? What kind of abuse?
A bruise on the face one time. And then the turning point was she was enrolled to go to Slippery Rock College and take up dancing. And on her 18th birthday in February, I came home from work and she was gone. Her husband took her out, her future husband took her out, and they moved into an apartment, and I tried to get her back and she wouldn't come back. And then the problem started, and then they got married, and then we thought the abuse was stopping, but she never came out and publicly told me that she was being abused, which we knew. We tried to get her help, and she never made the phone call to Domestic Violence Service Center, and that's the main point I'm trying to stress. You have to make that phone call to get help. Because she told me that she was not being abused, even though we could see the signs, always trusted her because we were Christians. And we never thought there was that much evil in a person. Finally, we kept the door open. Another sign of the abuse was we couldn't go down and meet her. I tried to get her out of the relationship twice, and she wouldn't come back home, even though we saw the signs.
Had you spoken with this boyfriend or
Yes,
whatever
yes,
at any time?
yeah,
And
yeah.
did he?
He denied it. He just kept his head down, saying, actually said nothing.
Did it make it worse for your daughter after you spoke with him? Did he go back and do anything
I don't know.
harmful to her?
Don't know. But we had to meet halfway to pick her up to see her. He flattened the 4 tires on her car, so she had no way to get back to us. She was a prisoner in her house, in his house.
So they were married about 4 years?
This is before they got married. And They got married, and then they were stayed together for 3 years, and then started to break up. And then she finally came to stay with us Christmas of 2008. And then she was stayed away from him for 6 months. She was living with us at home and with her girlfriend. And then she made the she told him that she wanted a divorce and to sell the house. And 2 days later, she was murdered. And see, that's the point I'm trying to make. And Tammy has taught me that it's very dangerous when a person states they want a divorce and out of the relationship. That's where the anger sets in. And we all told her to stay away, don't go back to the house. And she told her girlfriend that day when she went back, thinking she was going to get a new car off him. We don't know the whole story. And she said to her girlfriend, he doesn't have the guts to hurt me anymore.
So he, in other words, lured her back.
Yes.
So the anger set in after she asked for the divorce.
Yep.
Backing up just for a minute, when they got married, were you at the wedding?
Yes. Yep.
So did everything seem okay?
Everything seemed okay.
So on the outside, everything seemed okay, and your daughter was telling you everything was okay. So you're like, well, I guess everything's okay. I guess it's just me.
Yep. She never came straight out and told us, even though everyone saw the abuse. So anyway, I'll continue on. After she was murdered, we found her body in the basement. She didn't go to work. She was working as a receptionist at Dr. Stone's office over in Huntington Mills. So she didn't come back to our house for Father's Day. Father's Day was the Sunday, and we found her body Monday morning. And
in her house?
In her house, in the basement. Okay? And he tried to make it look like a suicide. And then a year later, they convicted him. They had him under house arrest because he stole her car, and they picked him up in Nevada. The federal marshals did. Anyway, after she died, she came to me in a dream. And she said to me, Dad, you have to help other women. And
you're giving me the chills.
And she said to me in the dream, it's very real, you have to help other women get out of abusive relationships. And I woke up with this image of this button here, and it says, don't hit me. So the words were in my head from her, and I'm thinking, what does this button mean, don't hit me? I'm thinking, this sounds kind of corny. Then I realized that maybe if someone is so stupid to be hitting their wives or their spouses, maybe if they saw the button, they would stop hitting. But the main point of this button is to start conversation, to bring awareness out in the community, to have people realize that they have to get help. And that's why I'm out here speaking, hopefully to save other people's lives.
Now this happened in 2009.
2009, June 19th, Friday night, she was killed.
I'm sure it doesn't get easier.
No, it doesn't get easier. Every morning, every day I think of her.
Now you're married and you have
Yep.
2 additional children. You have another daughter.
Yes.
What's it like for her? Are you on pins and needles constantly with this other daughter?
No, because she was actually with me when we found Rebecca's body.
That's sad way.
Yeah, so she understands the problems, and she saw the problems too.
The reality.
But she's happily married, and I have 3 grandchildren now, so you know, life is good.
That's good. Tammy, with Terry sharing his story, is this something that you see repeatedly over and over, stories like this?
Unfortunately, yes. Rebecca is part of what we call the empty place at the table, which it is a long table that we set up every October that has place settings on it that represents victims who died as a result of domestic violence. Rebecca is on our table. We have Cameron Schultz, the 2-year-old little girl that was killed by her father. We have a 37-day-old baby. We have 75-year-old women on the table. We have a police officer. We have a priest. We have a man who was in a same-sex relationship. So this is something that we see we always have somebody else to put on it every year.
And those no boundaries either, what you're saying from the broad spectrum of ages is to also relationships.
Absolutely. It's unreal. And unfortunately, you know, you talk about, you know, is it getting any better? It's hard to measure, because is it getting any better, or are more people coming out and talking about it?
Well, hopefully with programs like you're speaking with people and informing them, education programs like this, and with the openness with the internet and other programs that where people have stepped forward, hopefully that people who are in abusive relationships are able to get the courage to make the call and to try and stop the cycle, you know, to really get out of there and to save their own lives. A lot of times, I'm sure you reached out to your daughter many, many, many times, and we were speaking before, they get brainwashed into thinking that everything's going to be okay.
Exactly.
So 1 minute you could get a punch, and the next minute they're buying you a new car.
Yep. What we thought could not have happened, happened. And that's why I'm speaking out, to help other people.
I wanted to put up the signs really quick one more time on the screen. If you can answer yes to any of these questions, or maybe you know of someone going through this, the numbers are up on the screen for you to call and get help from the Domestic Violence Service Center. Again, everything that is said there, I'm assuming, is confidential.
Absolutely. And all of our services are free as well. So they can call 24/7. You're always going to get a hold of a counselor advocate. We always have somebody on duty. Even if you call at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to get a counselor advocate. You're not going to get an answering service. It's an actual person on the other end of the line.
What can a person do who knows someone who's being abused and doesn't have the ability to make the call? What can we do support-wise? What can we do to take action? Just keep encouraging?
Stay with them. Don't give up on them. In actuality, a lot of times women will say, well, I don't have the support of family or friends. A woman will leave between 9 and 11 times before they actually leave for good. So, because you know, a lot of times the family has said, look, we've helped you out with money, helped you out with the kids, helped you out with a car, helped you out with an apartment, and every single time you take them back. We're done, we're finished. Stay with that person, because eventually you're going to get that phone call, I need help.
Tammy, thank you so much for coming on, and Terry, thank you for sharing your story with us. A lot of good, helpful information here today, a serious topic, domestic violence.
You're watching The Girls, make sure you call and tell your friends about this show, of any show, and you can watch it again and again, the signs, the symptoms, and what you can do to help. And I hope that you're safe. We'll see you next time on The Girls.